And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Camille James Harman, actress and UFO experiencer. Her film credits include the Oscar-winning film Vice, Shameless, A Daughter's Deceit, and more. In 1995, she had her first UFO sighting and abduction experience followed, which we're going to learn about and more. Camille, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you so much. I love talking about these anomalous experiences, and especially with someone like you who's familiar with out of body and near death experiences, because that's part of my story as well.
Well, let's get right into your story because I think you were traveling from Louisiana to LA and that's how you saw the UFO.
Pretty much, I was moving. I had just moved from New Orleans to Los Angeles, and a couple of months later was when all this started. I think it may have been triggered by purchasing one of the Whitley Strieber books in New Orleans shortly before I moved. I was walking through the bookstore one day and saw his book Breakthrough, which is a blue and silver cover with the alien face on it. And I vaguely knew about him. I had seen the movie Communion because I love Christopher Walken, but I hadn't read his book Communion. So when I saw this, I just thought, oh my God, that guy is still writing about aliens. I wonder what he has to say now. And so I bought it and read it, and it just blew my mind, like the whole subject matter of the military involvement and all that. And it really was a life-changing book, and I had no idea I was involved in that. But very shortly after, because that was in August, I read that book, August 95. We moved to New Orleans in September, and we had a great place to live in this house on a hill with a great view for looking for UFOs, I noted. And we had day jobs. We were both actors, and we thought we had arrived. We were going to take the town in LA. We both had wonderful degrees and credits and union cards and the whole thing. We were all set, right? I got an agent right away. Everything should have been going great. And yet, I started to notice I was having all these weird physical symptoms in my body, like being pregnant. Just, you know, like sore breasts and no menstrual cycle and a lot of anxiety. And I'd never been pregnant before that I knew of. And I was on the pill, which was kind of scary. So, I thought, well, it must be stress, just the stress of moving. And I just waited. Usually I'd go run to the Walgreens and get a pregnancy test and be done with it, right? And find out. So, but I didn't do that. I kept waiting and waiting. And then in December, so several months later, we were walking our dog Opal in the neighborhood, and we saw a daylight sighting of this thing in the sky. And I was so excited and startled. And and Eric, my boyfriend, was mocking me and saying, "You and your UFO book," and we looked at each other, and then when we looked back, it was gone, and we were on the hill with the whole sky, and I knew it was a UFO. 'Cause it was like I don't know how to explain it. Very high altitude, black, small something with a shimmer around it, and perfectly stationary. We had a palm tree for scale to look, and it wasn't moving, and there was no noise. And then when we looked at each other and looked back, it was gone. So I, I handed him the leash to our dog, and I ran home. And they actually had a UFO hotline in the phone book back then, and I called it and reported it, and it was MUFON. And they said, "Oh, thanks for calling it in. And also, we have these meetings once a month if you want to come." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm going." So, but right after that sighting in December, I had this night when I woke up twice in one night with sleep paralysis. And I had had that occasionally before in my life, but I had never had it twice in one night, and I had never had it associated with other weirdness. And in this case, I woke up um, hearing a voice next to my ear saying my name, Camille, with this like robot sounding voice, this like computerized sounding voice, electronic, whatever you want to call it. It was very disturbing because I'd never, heard anything before. And it wasn't a dream, and it wasn't, uh, it didn't make any sense. And also, I had an image of a gun pointed at my face. At the same time, I heard that noise, and I was like, "Okay, what the hell just happened?" And then it happened later again that night. And this time, Eric was watching a movie at the first time. He was in another room, but then the second time it happened, he was with me, and he heard me moaning and coming out of it. Because when you break out of sleep paralysis, you oftentimes your voice is the first thing to be released from the grip. And so I started going to the MUFON meetings in, I believe, January, and my menstrual cycle came back magically. Um, so I eventually saw Kim Carlsberg speak, who is an abductee she was from the Malibu area, also in the film business. And she was the set photographer for Baywatch at the time and dating, I think it was a producer or director of Baywatch, and living with him out there by the beach. So her story was very startling. And Daryl Anka did the illustrations for her book, Beyond My Wildest Dreams, and she wrote the story. And so they presented together. And by the end of her lecture, I was just like shaking in the back row. And I just, I just knew I was one of those people. And I got up and I looked at her book, and it had a checklist. And I remember going through the list, and it was like, you might have been abducted if the kind of list. And I had like 85% of the symptoms. And I was introduced to Barbara Lamb, who's a regression therapist. And I said, I really want to schedule something with you. I want to investigate this weird sleep paralysis attack that I had in December. So that's what we did. And the first thing that we addressed in my regression, I think my regression was around April. There was another incident that had happened years before, I think around 1991. And I was sleeping at a dorm room, and I had this experience of being in this dream that had kind of a satanic theme. And in the dream, I felt like something was sucking my soul out of me through my solar plexus, like had stuck a tube in my chest. And I was going to die. And my soul was being sucked out of my body. And all I could think of was, stop in the name of Jesus Christ. I just screamed that out in my dream. And in my dream, everything stopped. And I woke up and I heard wind chimes. And I was like, "Oh my god, that was the weirdest dream I've ever had." So we targeted that as well. And in that memory, I had beings around me with like vertical slits, and there was a tube stuck in me. So I don't know what that was. Then we targeted the night in December when I had the sleep paralysis, and I got a full-on memory of being taken through the ceiling in a blue beam of light, this very turquoisey blue, very solid kind of light. It's more like a column of light than a spotlight. Um, and when it hits you, you just I in my case, I froze and I curled into a fetal position and I went through the ceiling. And then the next thing I knew, I was in this misty white room that was a very undefined, just kind of a misty place with these beings all looking at me and just in utter terror on this table, and saying, everybody's looking at me. I have a baby and they want it. And then my knees started going apart and no one was touching them. And then I really freaked out. And Barbara said, you can go above and watch this from above. And basically, this being that I could not identify uh, I had a flash of a speculum like instrument. And then this being quickly put that inside me and took it out. And there was something small in there, some small little fetus of some kind. I couldn't really make it out through the slats of this instrument. And then the being walked out of the room with it. And I was just crying, and I was just horrifically bereft and traumatized, and saying, they didn't even let me see it. And all these white beings that were, I guess you would describe as a gray with the black eyes and the big heads, and they were white, and they had white robes with some kind of an emblem, like a triangle inside of a circle emblem at their chest. And and then I came out of the hypnosis. So that was my first time, and I went home with my little cassette to my poor boyfriend and played that, right. And he's like, "Oh my god, like, what happened to you? I mean, is this real? What do we do with this?" I mean, 'cause if you heard it, my teeth are chattering. I'm just screaming like I've never. had that kind of terror in my life. It was the most real and yet surreal thing I've ever experienced. And you try to make sense of it. Like you say, okay, like I would tell people and they would say, "Oh, well, you must have had an abortion and you just feel bad about it." And it was some kind of weird memory. I said, "Well, that might make sense, but I've never had an abortion. So no, that doesn't make sense." And you just it's so hard because you feel so well, in my case, I felt so compelled to talk about it and tell my family and my friends. And I'm a communicator, I'm an actress. I talk. I had to talk to my uncle who worked for NASA, and he was like, "If it's true, it's NSA, and they're never going to tell you, so you need to just get over it." So, hey, thanks a lot. Um, so it was very, life changing. You can't unsee that, you can't unknow it, and then it kept happening after that. So that was just the beginning.
Let
I'll
me
stop
stop.
here.
I was going to say, let me stop you for a moment because I have a bunch of questions to ask. First of all, I found it intriguing that just by Whitley Strieber's new book, you said that you were triggered by it, which makes me think it's possible that you made some sort of pre-birth contract with these
It could
ETs.
be
Is that
that.
possible?
I've been told that I've worked with many different healers. I've been told that I did, in fact, do that. I also wonder if I didn't have experiences in my childhood that I had blocked, because I have a lot of the signs of childhood abduction. And those, I would say, include things like recurring severe nosebleeds, especially at night, waking up with blood everywhere, having to have my nose cauterized, having a history of allergy problems, having paranormal fears as a child, having childhood trauma, sexual abuse and adoption, and just a lot of weird things in my childhood. So I think, we see a lot that there are abuse situations that can lead to an awakening of other realms. Now, that could be because the abuse makes you question reality, makes you have trust issues, so that you are on alert all the time, or it could be a brain chemistry something or other, or it could be a spiritual thing. But I know that people like Chris Bledsoe, who's another abductee that I've made friends with, contactee, he has, really referenced that trauma as a through line when you meet people that have had this experience. So it could be something from my childhood that I just don't recall.
Do you think it's possible that you were not having sleep paralysis? It was purposeful paralysis by them?
Yes. And as a matter of fact, when I was going to Bashar channelings in the late 90s, I asked him about the sleep paralysis, and he said it was a doorway sensation of changing dimensions.
Interesting. Now, when you said that you were taken up in the blue light, was it just your consciousness or did your body come along with you?
I have no idea because I didn't look down and see myself. And I think it's I think it's really you. I think it's really the whole body they take. And the reason I think that is because people have been witnessed up in the air. Cows have been witnessed up in the air. Um, and when they work on your body and it affects your body, it seems like they would need your whole body. Not to say that there aren't other experiences people have where it is just a spiritual thing, an astral thing, where you could be, just having an OBE. I think in the abduction cases, very often it's actually physically dematerializing you and taking you into this other frequency and putting you back.
It appears to me that with your hypnosis session, it wasn't just imagination. You had a visceral response along with it.
I mean, if my imagination could be that creative, I I've had it so many times, and every time I have had this reaction to the beings, it's been terror of a kind that I don't know in my regular life. Um, it's a fear of the unknown, and it's also a fear because They put you in a physical state where you don't have control over your body. And I will contrast that, because I mean, to kind of skip ahead, the next thing that happened to me was I had another weird thing happen. I had 3 nights in a row when my boyfriend was out of town, and I was waking up at 4 in the morning sharp, looking at the clock, going, "Okay, why am I awake? I didn't hear a noise. What's going on?" And it was 4:00 sharp, 3 nights in a row. And the third morning, I had this freshly bleeding, triangular puncture wound on my calf, like an array of 3 little pinpricks of a triangle. And I did a regression to that with a different person. Just for curiosity, I went to Yvonne Smith, who was the other lady in town who does regressions. And I got aliens again. But this time when I went up in the blue light, I went out the window. So I went up and then turned and then went out the window, which was very weird. And that was interesting to me. And then this time I was in the room. There were 3 short beings with wrinkly heads that surrounded me on 3 sides, and then a tall one with the white robes down by my feet. And I was cussing and screaming at the 3 little ones. Um, and one of them said, no, I said, "You make me scared of little kids because you look like little kids, but you're not little kids." And at the time, I was a substitute teacher working with little kids, and I had had some experiences. Well, I had one where these 3 kids surrounded me and they were pulling me toward a cabinet to show me where something was, and my whole body had like a cellular memory of being surrounded by short little people pulling me somewhere. And thank goodness I recovered in class and I didn't like freak out. But that's why that was fresh in my memory when I was saying that to that creature. And then he put his hand on my forehead and started doing this. And I said, "Get your freaking hand off me." But he made all my anger melt away by doing that. Like he took my anger away and I just became really passive. And then the tall one put this little triangular wound in my leg with some instrument that had come down from the ceiling. So that was weird. And that was with another regressionist. But again, teeth chattering, terror, the whole thing. Um, and then I had a what's called a military abduction experience. I don't know if you've interviewed people who've had that.
Kind of.
Okay. So whatever that is. So now it had a different quality as far as the hypnosis part. So I don't remember anything about this. The reason I went to the hypnotherapist for this problem was because my dentist had found something weird in my tooth. And I had told him, if you ever find anything weird in my body, you have to tell me. And he was like, okay. And then he found something weird in my body and he told me and he showed me. And it was a tooth. He had changed all my fillings, and then this one filling hurt, and I went back and I said, "I love all my new fillings, but this one hurts, so let's look at it." Anyway, he drilled it out to redo it, and he said he found this like spherical mass in my tooth, and he said this was not there before, and I don't know what you want me to do about it because it's really hard. And I can barely drill on it, and so he refilled it and it fixed the problem. But I did a regression, to discover what that was, because my curiosity was piqued. And in this regression, I didn't have the blue light. I just came to on a table in a regular exam room, like a human one, with humans in there, and they were guys in lab coats with khaki pants, and it was a regular room with cabinets and shelves and a door, and in this memory, I was very like drugged feeling. I felt my consciousness was not clear. And all I remember is them saying the word troublemaker at me and taking a syringe and sticking it through my cheek into my jaw where this tooth is, not like up through my mouth like a dentist would do, but like this way. And and then I was wheeled down the hallway on a gurney and put in a helicopter that the ceiling opened and it flew up. And I remember it was really bright. It was daytime. And they flew me home and dropped me off in this field by my house in Los Angeles in Silver Lake. And it's still a field, by the way. I just went over there recently and walked around. And they said, go home and take a nap. So I have no memory of getting out and walking home. I have no memory of how I got there. And the quality was this different kind of state. I wasn't crying and teeth chattering. It was more just drugged.
Earlier, you mentioned that You called out to Jesus or something, and then everything stopped.
Mhm.
Do you think ETs are really afraid of Jesus, or do you think that it's just that you were basically saying you don't want to participate in this anymore and they
Mm.
complied?
I think they're really afraid of Jesus, personally. I've just read a lot of books
Hmm.
by evangelicals. Later on, I read these books where they had a lot of testimonials of people stopping the abduction with prayer. But it's a good question. Like, is it because you're taking a stand, or is it literally because of who you're calling upon to help you? And I mean, I prefer to think it's that every knee shall bow. I prefer to think that Jesus is the king of the universe. That's how I see him. And so I do think that uh, I wonder about Jesus. I don't know what Jesus really is. Um, I mean, there's a lot you could say. Was Jesus a hybrid? Was he from another planet? Did he come and go on a spaceship? There are a lot of interesting things in the art and the descriptions of the cloud that would take him, for ascension and all of these things that make you wonder what those mechanisms were having to do with Jesus on Earth. Um, but I have a very affectionate place in my heart for Jesus. I do feel this very personal reality of Jesus. And I did go through a whole born again Christian thing and dropped out of UFOs for 9 years and went back to church and just was in my happy place. I actually did that as well, which is part of my journey. And I thought it was all demonic. But now I've come out of that perspective and I've broadened it again. And I think an element of it may be demonic, and an element of it is probably angelic. And it's just much more diverse and complex than saying it's all demons. That's how I currently think.
So are you thinking that non-human intelligences or ETs are actually beings that live here too, not from some other planet?
I think there is a very good argument to be made that they are from alongside us in other dimensions here on Earth, whatever Earth is.
Mhm.
You know, um, I mean, they come out of the water, they come out of the volcanoes, they come out of mountains. So there are plenty hiding places for these beings to live, you know, in some kind of coexistence with us right here. Um, they don't have to be from other planets. So there's that. And then you look into things like Tartaria research, which was a big eye-opening kind of rabbit hole that I went down, which
What is
is
that? Tartaria?
Tartaria it's kind of a broad term for this what was an ancient civilization that was where we would now call Russia, Eastern Europe, um, parts of China, and it's on ancient maps. This big name Tartaria. They had flags. They had there were things written about them. And then there's this similar architecture all over the world that we see. This classical architecture that people argue was made by a worldwide civilization. And these buildings weren't only beautiful with their columns and their turrets and domes and all these features, but they were built as machines. They were built as free energy generator machines connected to the ground and the waterways. And so that's a whole other kind of rabbit hole to go down. But that was part of my awakening to questioning our own reality here on Earth and the history of ourselves on Earth, and if there have been previous resets on Earth, and what that might mean as far as the placement of these other entities that are not human in our timeline, and how they've interacted with us throughout time. So that was another avenue to go down that actually ties into questions of UFOs, um, re-examining history, questioning history, wondering if history is written by the victor to such an extreme degree that there are things in our history that we haven't been told that are revealed in the architecture, in the geology, in these other studies.
Do you think that your terror due to the ETs was because they're scary beings? Or do you think it's possible that your body has some kind of fear reaction due to the energy that they give off?
I think it's that. I think it's not just the way they look. I think it's the feeling of lack of control when you're around them. And but I will say the only good experience I've had, like I didn't have that feeling when I was around the military abduction guys. I just felt drugged. Okay. But I was afraid. And when I came out of that hypnosis, I was so angry and afraid because I told Barbara, I said, if that happened to me and I didn't know that, then what the hell else has happened to me that I don't know about? And you feel more betrayal, right? Because it's your own kind, right? And it's just scary, like the idea that you'd been in a government program and all that. Um, and I've since talked to people like Nick Pope about this idea I have of possibly being selected for all this because of my genetics or because of something. Um, my NASA uncle, like I don't know, he worked for Werner von Braun in the early days of NASA, and I don't know, and I lived with him for a while in Huntsville, which is a very deep like NASA slash CIA town, and so you wonder things like, did I get put in a program or did I get put on a list like you can abduct these people because they have family in the program, or it makes you go there in your brain. And Nick Pope said, absolutely. He said they like to keep people in the program and in the family. And, um, you know, uh, I could have been put on a list for the UFO stuff because of that. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But I will say that, the stories I tell sound all bad, but it's not all bad. There's good stuff too. So I want to make sure we get to that as well.
Yeah, I was going to mention that because there are quite a few people out there that say all the ETs are good.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. So here's what happened next. So I noticed myself, this was in 1998. Um, no, 97, 98. Like, I don't remember. It was before I went to England. I went to England in July 98. So sometime before there. Um, I found myself saying things like, oh, humans, blah, 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 and humans this and humans that. And I started thinking, why am I talking like that? Like I'm not a human, or I'm aligning with some people that aren't human, or I don't know. It was weird. So I went to Barbara and I said, can we target this longing? Like I feel this longing for beings, but I don't think it's the ones that had me on the table scaring me to death. But why am I talking like this? And why do I have this feeling? So she put me under hypnosis and I had this full on out of body experience. And I remember this being like with long fingers and the white robes touching my hand when I was a baby and then withdrawing it and feeling like, no, don't leave me kind of feeling. And I don't know if it was an angel, I don't know what it was. But she said, well, and then I started having this panic attack like, I don't want to be in this body. I was screaming. I said, it's so weak. And I was having a panic attack and this claustrophobic feeling. And it felt, I described it like if you took a sofa and tried to stuff it into a pillowcase. And she said, well, then go to a place where you felt strong and happy or, whatever. And I went poof and I popped out. And then in the memory next, I was out in space in the void and I was a blue light. And I recognized two of my friends and they were blue lights. And I was crying and I was like, there's John and there's Nicole and they were blue lights. And then I saw Earth and Earth was spinning and I didn't want to go. It was like being on the end of a diving board. I was like, I don't want to go there. And she said, well, why do I have to go to Earth? And I said, I don't know. And she said, well, see if there's someone you can ask. So then these white light beings appeared and they were big and they were kind of formless, but they had arms and legs, but I couldn't make them out really. But I felt this extreme ecstasy, like total ecstatic union with these white light beings. And just the weeping, and they're my home, they're my family, and I'm melding and I'm getting all this information and this love from these white light beings. And I'm just like, why do I have to go to Earth? And they said, the Earth needs you. And I said, why? And they said, to fight evil. And I was like, oh God, seriously? Like, okay.
It sounds like you're a star seed.
It was so cool. Well, it does. And, I hear those terms and sometimes I roll my eyes and I'm like, am I delusional? Are we all delusional? The people who think they're connected like that. Like, I don't know how that fits into my view of things. I just know how it felt. I know how it felt. But then there's this part of me that's like, but the devil can appear as an angel of light, and so, like, was I tricked? Was that real? It was so loving and wonderful, and I like to think it's real, and I'm going with that, but I'm cautious. I'm cautious. And so, anyway, I asked the beings, like, how am I supposed to fight evil? And they said, by acting. And I said, oh, really? Because everything Hollywood makes is, not really helping that. And they said, don't worry, we will set it up so that you meet people and make projects worthy of your time. So, okay, twist my arm. That sounds awesome. So the very next film I did was a little short film at USC, but it was about a guy who has an angelic encounter. So that was kind of cool. So it was about angels, my very next film. And then I have done films that I feel have, been on that path. And I've done other things that are not really on that path. But I said, am I supposed to lecture about you? And they said, no, just tell people we exist and we love them. And they gave me this image of sending love through the universe, like out their fingers pointing at us. And they said, we're always here doing this, sending you love, but you're all walking around with umbrellas. And they gave me like this almost like a video game image of people walking around with umbrellas. And they're like, "Ooh," trying to hit us. And it was it was a really great image. So I feel so happy about that memory, and I'm really, really glad that happened under hypnosis. And I would classify it as an OBE under hypnosis, like a hypnosis induced OBE. It was totally unexpected and amazing.
I've had two guests talk about that there is an underground ET base in downtown Los Angeles. And I think one of them has even seen human ET hybrids. Do you know anything about that?
I have heard for years there's an underground reptilian base under LA, and there are tunnels and things. I have seen the pictures of the mysterious shelf with columns looking thing off of Malibu that Google Maps has now scrubbed, but you can look it up if you type in Malibu underwater base. You'll get stories on the news about it. So there's that. And Kim Carlsberg was brought under the ocean to some kind of a base under the ocean off Malibu. So I've heard rumors like that. Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't I don't hear of underground bases of ETs that are usually described as the good guys, you know? I I mean, there may be those stories out there. I haven't heard those stories.
Now, you're also a member of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, or you've even took part in creating it. What is that?
Well, I'm a founding member. I'm friends with Dan Harari, who started it with Steve Bassett. And I go to the MUFON meetings here in LA. So that's how I met Dan. And because we were both in the film industry, he said, I'm going to put together this group. And he told me about it. He said, I want you to be a founding member. And I said, oh, yeah, of course. So it's really exciting because it's a networking group primarily, but we do put on events. And we are related to other things. For instance, we're co-sponsoring Contact in the Desert this year out at Indian Wells at the end of May, which I'm going to, and I went to last year, and it was great. So, but it's a networking place for people in the UFO business and people in Hollywood to get to know each other and work together to create content that is based on pushing this narrative of, disclosure, like, hello, we know this stuff is real. When are you guys gonna, officially disclose it? And also to make content that reflects the true stories that people are putting out there. So I've been in a couple of documentaries, but also, making even in fiction too, to kind of suggest to fiction writers like, hey, why don't you put something that has this kind of a storyline, because this is what people are reporting in real life. So you may as well take that and, kind of go with that. Um, so it has that purpose. And there's some really big names in this group. It's very exciting. So a lot of big UFO names, and then people like Shirley MacLaine is in the group. So I'm thrilled.
Do you think that the ETs are slowly dripping ideas into screenwriters'
Yes.
consciousness while they're sleeping?
Yes, I do, for sure. And I think also like Daryl Anka, who channels Bashar, also works in the Hollywood special effects industry. And he made models for shows like, I think it was Battlestar Galactica. He like, here's a guy channeling an alien who's making spaceships for shows, right? And another person in our group is Paul Hynek and his brother Joel Hynek. And we were at an event recently, and they're both in the film industry as well in special effects. And Joel Hynek, who's the son of J. Allen Hynek, who ran Project Blue Book, okay? Um, he got the Oscar for the bullet sequence in The Matrix when, Neo is moving like this and the bullet. So there's some very, very creative people. I know that Yvonne Smith, my regression therapist, has a lot of Hollywood clients that are, people she's worked with in regressions with the UFO phenomenon. So yeah, there are a lot of us in the business. Um, I also think that the CIA is heavily involved in this. Take that for what you want, but they also work closely with Hollywood to put out certain narratives. Now, you could argue that's good or bad. I don't know. But I do think that the close cooperation between Hollywood and the defense industry and the intelligence agencies is well documented. I mean, that could be useful for anything to, put out propaganda war movies and have access to planes and tanks and whatever. But also, think about it. If you're going to do disclosure and you're going to do it over time to acclimate people's consciousness to the idea, what better way than to, create films, documentaries, shows like on the History Channel? I mean, why are the biggest shows on the History Channel about the paranormal? You know, like what's up with that?
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, like, who are these producers really, and what's going on? And I'm not accusing; I'm just suggesting that could be happening.
Well, don't you think we're ready by now for full
Well,
disclosure?
I think the implications of it are so large and could involve so many crimes committed by our government. I think that's one of the considerations. And I think if it is the case that there are bad creatures that we're also dealing with that are hurting people or consuming people or whatever, which has been reported, um, like it's one thing to say, yes, there are aliens flying around. It's another thing to say, and they live alongside us in underground bases, and they, are eating humans or experimenting on humans, or, you know, like I've often suspected there's a link between human trafficking and the beings in the underground bases.
I just kind of feel like we're never going to be completely ready. So let's just get on with it.
Well, I think that the only thing that would make them hurry up would be that if there was an event horizon of some kind that was either, you know, cosmic or spiritual or brought on by the beings themselves, like you have this long to get your people ready, and then something's going down and they're all going to find out anyway. So it seems like that's in the works, and I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing, but I think that something imminent is happening, and it's all going to come out whether they try to keep it secret or not.
When you say imminent, is that like within the next year or two?
I think within our lifetime, because many reasons. There are a lot of people who have that feeling. I mean, I'm married to an astrologer, so there's a lot of astrology right now that's very dicey, transformative astrology. Also things like if the beings know the timeline, let's say they have advanced knowledge of some kind of timeline, they would spend their energy working on people of this generation, since childhood, right? I'm 57 years old, okay? So you have a bunch of people my age about and older that have been prepped. They've been prepped for this time, right? To be some kind of a useful person in the event that this goes down. If they knew the event wasn't happening for another 50 years, they would have waited and prepped a different set of humans.
That makes sense. Do you think it's possible that there are some type of ETs walking around among us that we can't
Yes.
recognize them?
Yes. And I I have to believe that's possible with all the hybrid breeding stories you hear, including whatever happened to me. And what is that for? David Jacobs thought it was to create an invasive force, you know, a hybrid race to invade Earth and take over. Um, I don't know what it's for. I don't know. I have seen people. There was a guy that came to a support group meeting once that I was in, and he was so unusual looking. He was very beautiful. He had very large eyes, and he told us that his mother had told him that his father was an alien. And we were the right group to tell that, because we were like, dude, you look like you're half alien. So, I mean, there are people that physically you wonder when you see them every once in a while, you'll see somebody that you're like, that's an unusual person. I don't know. Who knows?
Could you ever take it to the extreme that the Earth is a prison and the aliens are just keeping us in check here?
Well, I don't know about a prison, because there is beauty in the prison as well. But I do think that there must be some kind of hierarchy of beings, and whatever we have been designed for, this is our home. You know, we may be related to things that are from somewhere else, but um, I like to think there are helpful beings, angelic beings, whatever you want to call them, that are here to help us, you know, become more spiritually aware and awake and advanced and all that. Um, I don't know. It ties into so many things I believe that conflict too. I don't know. You have these. I have these Christian perspectives, right, of some kind of an apocalyptic scenario as well. And then my husband, as an astrologer, he says we are so tied into the matrix of the planetary configuration, the machine that is the planetary motion. He said we can only have a giant, like, massive change of consciousness if the planet's physical relationship to everything else is adjusted, because that's the only thing that would really restart the matrix of that. So as above, so below. Like, if everybody in humanity is going to wake up suddenly to something, he says it has to be a physical change in the planet, relative to everything else in the sky.
So he believes the realm that we live in is some sort of simulated universe.
Well, he's heard me talk about simulation theory, which is very intriguing. Um, there does seem to be something. Well, obviously, it's very mechanized. It's mechanized astronomically, right? But there are times in history when that pattern in the sky has seemed to have had changes. If you look at the electric universe theory and you look at the art on the rocks of the petroglyphs and such that seem to be depicting plasma discharges interacting with Earth. If you look at Mars and you look at even Earth, some people say the Grand Canyon is a result of a plasma discharge, um, not, a process that took thousands of years, that was just the Colorado River moving through rock. So you look at some of the geologic anomalies on Earth and wonder, like, what happened here? Like, stuff's happened. And did that come from outer space? Did we have rogue planets interacting with us, and electromagnetic discharge coming off of planets and stuff? And it's a more interesting history than we're being told.
CE5, good idea or bad idea?
I'm cautious. The most recent thing I've done in that department, well, I was at Contact in the Desert using the night vision goggles to look for UFOs. But Chris Bledsoe is the one who has really made me, kind of open up to what he considers these good beings, right? And I said, I would love to have the out of body beings, those light beings, interact with me again. That would be great, but I don't want to be on the table with the other beings, right? So he said, just go outside and say to God, God, I'm willing to work with your angels again, your good angels, if you want to say it that way, and see what happens. And so I did have an experience that might have been something, after trying that, after meeting Chris Bledsoe. It could have been like a hitchhiker phenomenon. So I'm open, but I'm very cautious. And, you know, I I just don't want anything so traumatizing that my soul is at risk, or I'm not able to function in daily life. Like, even through all this, I was able to keep my jobs and function, and I never had a nervous breakdown. I never became a drug addict. I don't even have tattoos. I managed to like keep on keeping on. But I just don't want to invite chaos.
There's a theory out there that I love that when the CE5 contact is happening, the beings are right next to us in another dimension that we can't see, and they're putting on the show for us. You heard about that?
No, but I think that the beings are alongside us. I think that makes sense. I think they're always alongside us in some capacity. Like, I mean, in Catholicism, we have, guardian angels, right? And Padre Pio, who was quite the mystic, he said, you need to talk to your guardian angels. They're around, your guardian angel is there helping you all the time. And I have a friend, Myron Dial, who's an epileptic mystic. And he has a being that's been with him since he was a child, having epileptic seizures, and his parents thought he was possessed and they were beating him, that kind of a thing. And this being appeared and has been his guide all through his life, and he's in his 80s. And he'll be sitting at the kitchen table with me and he says, oh yeah, my being is right there. I can see her. And he's having like a conscious interface at all times with this other reality. And he does paintings of what he sees that are amazing. So again, I don't know. I don't have that gift. My husband can see ghosts. He can see things. I've seen a couple of UFOs, and I have photographs of me with anomalies in the photos, or photographs I've taken where there are anomalies in the photo. So I've had that, but I'm not super psychic to where I see stuff. I don't. I don't say that about myself.
Do you remember what was on that checklist for a person to decide if they've been abducted or not?
There were so many things. There were things like the paranormal fears, the missing time, gone to sleep and woken up somewhere else, or had your clothes on backwards, or um, grass on your feet, like sleepwalking kind of thing. Also, questions about allergies and nosebleeds as a child, um, seeing UFOs, obviously, feeling paralyzed, sleep paralysis, of things. I don't recall. I mean, I have the book over there, but I don't. It was a long list, and then they had categories for men and women separately because of the sex factor with the breeding and all that. Because I mean, women very very often report this, very hospital like fetus removal, and also being impregnated with some kind of tools, not sex with aliens. But I know men that have had sex with aliens, so they say, men that have been forced to ejaculate artificially, through a probe of some kind to get reproductive fluid to be used. So they've been, what they consider abused by aliens, just like the women have reported. So those are things on the list.
I don't want you to name any names, but are there a lot of famous Hollywood people that go to the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance?
There are people that come from all parts, not just actors, but like directors, and there are a lot of people involved that are not just performers. Um, but there are performers on the list. Dee Wallace, whom you interviewed,
Hmm.
she's in the group, and she's an actress and an experiencer of some kind with her beings. I don't know if she gets into whole like UFOs and stuff, but Shirley MacLaine has seen UFOs and interacts with non-human entities. She's officially in the group, but she hasn't come to any meetings. But I mean, she's officially in the group. So we've had one big meeting together when we started, and then we've had other events. So I may see them at future meetings. I don't know. I don't know how. I know Shirley MacLaine just turned 90. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think yesterday or the day before. Um, and a lot of people lay low. She's very out of the closet. I've always been really out of the closet about it, but not everybody feels like being out of the closet.
You know what'd be cool is if somebody made some kind of either series or movie about the Alliance and
Hmm.
have, make a whole story about Hollywood's being told to create stuff about ETs, and ETs are interacting with, directors, producers, and stuff like that. I think it'd be real interesting.
There is a book called Hollywood versus the Aliens that I read back in the 90s that is about that. And it also does mention these alliances with the Department of Defense and et cetera. Um, there are also a lot of musicians. It's not just film and TV people, but they're also musicians that have had experiences like Sting. I used to be obsessed with
Really?
Sting,
I didn't know he had.
obsessed, and I
I didn't.
met him several times. Sting saw a UFO. It was written about in a book on him by Christopher Sanford. He tells the story of seeing a UFO. He said lit up like a Christmas tree. He also lives. I went to his house, like not in his house, but to his house. When I went to see the crop circles in England in 1998, I went to Sting's house and I saw Sting stand. I couldn't move. Anyway, but he lives right by Stonehenge. He lives in this huge estate right by Stonehenge. I rode my bike past Sting's house to Stonehenge. And so he's seen a lot with the crop circle phenomenon and mentioned it before. So yeah, there are a lot of people. He's also seen a ghost. Yeah. So he talks about that. Um, there's a lot of crossover. I'm speaking in June at an event at Glen Tavern Inn, which is a haunted inn here in California, and I'm in a new group that's a crossover group between UFO people and ghost people because there's so much crossover in the studying both phenomena. And so we're holding an event where a bunch of UFO people are speaking at a haunted hotel, and then they're going to have ghost hunting at night with all the machines and the gadgets that they use to capture the ghosts. So that'll be interesting.
Well, what else are you working on that you want people to know about?
I'm always acting. I'm doing things here and there. I just finished 4 days of filming a series, an internet series. I've been doing some internet series, these what are called vertical short form um, episodic. They're kind of soap opera like things. And I have a film coming up that I'm shooting that's a black and white film
Hmm.
about 1930s. And what else is coming out? I just do a lot of things. I had a kind of a rough couple of years because we had all these strikes last year that really slowed down business. But I'm FICOR, so I can do union and non-union work.
Well, if people want to find out more about you, do you have a website?
Yes, they can go to my website, CamilleJamesHarman.com. And I have all my social media links there, and my IMDb profile is there. Um, and they can see me in Alien Disclosure Files, episode 13 on Amazon with John B. Wells narrating. I'm going to be in an upcoming project with Caroline Corey called Closure with Caroline Corey, and that's not out yet. Those are two documentary things, and then there are clips of my acting and stuff on my website.
Well, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Enjoy the synchronicities and the blessings and all the signs as you move through life in your search of the truth, and just enjoy the exciting parts because we all have good and bad in life, and you have to stay positive, you have to stay loving, you have to stay aware, and just understand that it may take until we die to know the true answers. I should finish my book. I was going to finish it when I had the answer, but I may never have the answer, and I should write the book anyway, so I might do that too.
Camille, thank you for your message, and thank you for sharing your life with us today.
You're welcome. It was fun. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.